This is a study titled Guidelines for Happy, Successful Living. And it is an esoteric analysis of the Ten Commandments I would like to deal with for a moment. The word esoteric and the word exoteric, esoteric, indicates inner meaning, spiritual meaning, real meaning. Words and figures are exoteric, exoteric, outer. So words and figures are exoteric, outer external symbols. Esoteric interpretation reveals the inner real meaning behind the exoteric or outer words and symbols. Here now is my definition of the Ten Commandments. It's a different definition than is usually given or thought of. After all, you see, the Ten Commandments are not just simply a set of thou shalts and thou shalt nots. The Ten Commandments are really guidelines for right thinking, which produce right living and right results. I want to be purposely redundant about this. The Ten Commandments are really guidelines for right thinking, which produce right living and right results. This is where our fundamentalist friends miss out completely on the interpretation of the Bible and the effectiveness of religion. It is impossible to interpret the Bible so-called literally and get a correct interpretation. The Bible is a book of mind science, a book of spiritual psychology. The Ten Commandments are guidelines for right thinking, for there cannot be right living or right results without first right thinking. And this is again where the evangelists have missed the boat in religion, by trying to get people to live right without first of all teaching people to think right. And so in our consideration of the Ten Commandments in this series, we are studying the Ten Commandments as guidelines for right thinking, which produce right living and right results. This is session 1, and in this session, we are considering the first commandment. You will find this first commandment and all of the Ten Commandments in the 20th chapter of the book of Exodus in the Old Testament, in the Holy Bible, in the Judeo-Christian scriptures, as they would say in the theological seminary. And I read the first commandment for you from Exodus, the 20th chapter, the 2nd and 3rd verses. As a matter of fact, will you join me in the reading of this commandment? I am the Lord your God, which have brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. Right away, the first thing that the first of the Ten Commandments does is to tell us what God is. And if there happens to be any kind of examination, the first question is going to be, how does the first commandment define God? I am is the self-definition of God given in the first commandment. I am the self-definition of the infinite, the self-revelation of the infinite. The first commandment reveals God to be I am. Who is I am? I am is infinite, unconditioned self-awareness. I am is formless self-awareness. It is by thought that we condition the unconditioned God. It is by thinking that we form the formless God. I want to use an example that I've used several times before whenever I've spoken to you about unconditioned self-awareness and formless self-awareness. Let us just imagine that there is a cookie maker or a biscuit maker in front of us with a table, and in the bowl is a great big hunk of dough. Cookies are being made. I remember my mother making up the dough to make cookies. And that great big hunk of dough was without form and void. And my mother had these little cookie cutters. She would take the dough, flatten it out on flour on the table, take a cookie cutter and impress it upon a piece of formless dough and cut out a star or an animal or some other shape. The infinite God, infinite substance, infinite being is like that great big unformed hunk of dough. It just is. In other words, that great big unformed, formless hunk of dough really says, I am. The cookie cutter is your thought, because your thought defines the shape or the form that that dough will take. This brings abstract theology, I believe, a little closer to us. And so I am, again, is what? Formless self-awareness. Unconditioned self-awareness. Unconditioned awareness of being. That dough just is until you make it a star or an animal by cutting it with your thought. Ladies and gentlemen, you, man, is always conditioning the unconditioned God by his thought. Man, you are always forming the formless God with your thought. Isn't that an awesome consideration? Your mind, your individual mind, your individual thought process is that which forms the formless God. And the formless God becomes to you whatever you think. Wow. And so the first commandment reveals God to be I am. Infinite, meaning limitless, endless, unconditioned self-awareness. I am that I am means I am that which I am aware of being. Say that with me. I am that which I am aware of being. I am that I am also means I am that which I think I am. Together, I am that which I think I am. The first commandment is a revelation that awareness, and awareness alone, is God, cause, reality, power, anything. I'm somewhat hesitant, but yet I must debunk now the anthropomorphic God. Anthropos in Greek meaning man. Anthropomorphic. The man-like God. God is not a big man in the sky. As a matter of fact, the only personality that God, unconditioned self-awareness, has is in you as man. And it's interesting also, do you know that God and man really create each other? Every man takes God and conditions him with his thought, with his belief. The first 3 commandments, by the way, are really the same. Variations only upon the same theme. But you're going to have to come to think of God and to get a sense, a feeling of unconditioned self-awareness, what that is. Awareness, consciousness. Awareness alone is God, cause, reality, power, anything. I inserted a warning to keep some people from going off. I am, or I am God, is not human self or ego. Got that? I am God does not mean that Mary Sue Jones is God, the Almighty, or that Charlie Brown is God Almighty.